then Friday, I went around to different rooms. Same thing on Saturday. So I just kind of hit the highlights. Borenson, is that the name, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard them about 4 years ago when they first came on the scene.
Yeah.
As far as Florida Audio
really
Expo, and I was like, "Where's the sub?" They're like, "There's no sub." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" Because they had them in the middle of the room, so they weren't getting any like boundary gain from corner loading them. I'm like, I even looked behind their curtain because I'm like, "Nah, y'all are messing with me." No, they're full sound, man. It's really nice.
So those are really cool. They had the one thing that I noticed immediately about them was the depth of the soundstage was ridiculous, but they also had them really far out from the walls.
Yes, correct.
Right. So
they're like in the middle of the room. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of really made me think, like, I wonder what would happen to the depth if you pushed them closer to the back wall. Like, I wonder if that later reflection from that back wall is so late that it sounds deeper because of that. And that's not something that I've really ever looked into myself. So I'd be curious to play around with that. They
always tell you, like, hey, bring them out into the room. Most people can't because it just looks silly sitting in the middle of your living room. But if you can, a lot of guys will do that. But you're right, man. Every time I've heard those, I'm just like, dang, but I think they're like $12,000 a pair. I think.
Yeah, somebody, you know what?
And that's for the bookshelves. That's not for the towers. They had towers in, I think, the other room.
Yeah, so they had it's the Z1 Borison Z1. I'll pull it up here just so people can kind of see what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I've got some B-roll footage of it, but
you have to bear with me. Let me see here for those watching who may be curious. Smack that all on the floor. Smack that. Give me some more.
Oh my! Is that what you do?
That's what you.
What? I'm just singing a song, you guys. Weird.
Hey, I don't know what you're doing. Funny story about that song. I don't know if I told you guys before. One time, Angela and I were getting a massage from this lady, and they have that that music that they play when you're getting massage,
serene, calming music.
The next song was that one. So imagine she's over there and you're like half naked, smack that. It's like, oh, my freaking kids. Messing with my playlist.
Oh yeah, the Z2s are $25,000.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go.
These are the Z1s that I got to listen to. I wish I had a picture kind of on standby, but yeah, that's what they look like.
Yeah, they're cool, man.
Yeah, they were really impressive. Like, I would really like to. I would have liked to have been able to hear 94 dB sensitivity. Yeah. Oh, that's just tweeter efficiency. That's kind of misleading. Then
that is.
Anyway,
so the companies are from like Sweden.
Yeah, overseas. A lot of these I had no idea. I'm looking at the list going,
they make a lot of good speakers.
I don't know the name of any of these guys.
Yeah. What else do they have? Yeah. Anyway.
Is it because they're hardcore like math people over there, or what's going on? How come they make good speakers?
I don't know, man. It makes you wonder. So it was those. Then there was another company called was it Eritai? And I'll pull those up. Michael, did you get to listen to those?
I didn't hear that room. Because again, a lot of them I didn't. I'm like, I don't even know who this is. And I've been to the show like 3 years in a row.
Right. I would not have listened to these if it had not been for Doug Schneider of Soundstage Network. And if you give me a second, I will pull a picture of those or the website up real fast. Oh, it's all stuck in my head.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I know it, dude. I don't know why either. But that's the speaker. That's the 100S. So it looks like it's a 7-inch woofer on the front. Let's see what other pictures they've got here. It looked like a 7-inch passive radiator on the back.
Oh, that's wild. It has
they say
waveguide, but it's outside of the box.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you can. Hopefully, you guys can see that.
It's like a passive radiator on the back, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And they say double woofer topology. It looks. I'm assuming it's probably a passive radiator. Most of the time, that's what these things are.
Yeah.
And I had the price list, and I think that speaker was $9,000 per pair for that speaker.
Sure.
Which it's just crazy, man. But they got really low. They were sitting on like a table or something. And when I went over to the table, I actually touched the table to make sure they weren't sitting on subwoofers because they had them covered in like a black grill cloth or black carpet or something like that. Just, so your eye wouldn't be drawn to that. Those speakers were impressive. I did not get to hear the per listen.
Oh, wow.
The M5B hold on. Help me out here. 5M? R5M. So it's their lower cost lineup, but it's the monitor speaker.
So I know
I got to hear from the back seat.
I know you've mentioned certain speakers that you would want in your space, and you've mentioned the Kef Blades. You've mentioned the JBL. I forgot the numbers.
Yeah, right.
On
Anyway, I played the 4367 JBL.
Yeah, and I'm curious, why not per listen? Because it seems like they measure well, and it seems like, I mean, for me, it seems like I would like some per listen speakers or some Revel speakers. It just based on the measurements, they look good to me.
Well, per listen is now on my list, and I actually think I'm gonna ask about the pricing on those. I'm actually going to ask about the pricing on what they actually had. So this is the R5M, right?
The monitor.
And it's right. And they had these on some just regular old stands, but then they had Michael. Do you recall the model for the subwoofer?
So that is it's the 10. It's like the 10-210. It's a sealed. Keep going.
Maybe it's that one.
That one right there, R10 210 or R10S.
Okay.
So it's a push-pull configuration. I talked with Dan. He said, because I asked him, I said, is that the same push-pull as in your larger ones? He said, yeah. So, yeah, you can see it right there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And
that setup.
It's a cool sub, dude.
From the back seat.
Clean.
Oh, yeah. It was just that's the one thing I like about good sub setups when they're well integrated is the dynamics of the whole system increases so much when you can take the load off the speakers, or the mains.
Take the low end.
Yeah. Would you say those are good looking speakers?
Oh, well, the R is okay. Seen them in person,
so
the R is okay. The S are gorgeous. I'll be honest with you. I love the finish. Oh yeah, I love the finish on them. They have this what would you call it? Checkerboard kind of carbon fiber on the driver.
On the driver,
it's the Tech Stream cone. Yeah,
and there's like physical reason why they do that. I think I don't know if it's for rigidity or if it's something else, but it's more than just a cool look. So
right.
When I did,
the way it's just not just a design feature.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Yeah. So
there's a whole reason why they did that.
Right. Typical paper cones push the breakup mode up to a higher frequency than metal cones. So metal cones will have a very high Q resonant peak. Probably say if it's a 6 or 7 inch woofer, it's going to be around 3 to 4 kilohertz. Right. And that's going to be harder to fix with crossover. You're going to need a specific notch filter and things like that. You can do it, but it's a little bit harder. People sometimes prefer paper cones because they don't have such a high Q peak, and the resonances are a little bit more damped, and they're spread out a little bit more over different frequencies. So when you're building a speaker and you're trying to build a passive crossover network for it, it might be a little bit easier. These are just trade-offs. Nothing is better than the other.
Yeah.
Always. It just depends on what you're looking for. But with the Tech Stream, what they do is the cone material is made to where instead of one large peak or a couple smaller peaks, you have a whole bunch of itty bitty little tiny peaks, right? So all the resonance that you have is broken up over a whole bunch of frequencies, a very, very broad band, to the point where you basically don't hear it. That's the idea behind the material.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool
it's
explanation,
cool stuff, man.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing when I interviewed them 2 years ago, the biggest thing I took away from that is you guys truly care about science, measurements, data. I mean, it's all about that. I mean, they want to make a gorgeous looking speaker and something even in their subwoofers that look really, really cool. But at the end of the day, man, they just want to make sure this thing performs well. And Dan told me, he said they were up to, I think, 31 THX Dominus certifications now.
Wow.
I mean,
that's nuts, man.
Who the heck has done that? But they just make sure that every one of their speakers, as you go into the bigger towers and the bigger monitors, you're just getting more SPL for the most part. It's not like they're sacrificing by going with the small one. So, but
distortion about those. Yep. Yeah. So Ohm Audio Channel says the distortion numbers on those are silly good. And I'm curious, does that translate to lower listening levels also? Is it oh, you know what? I can tell that these are cleaner overall just because I'm not even close to their limits. Is that something that happens?
So maybe the one way that I think it could relate to it is in terms of compression. So if you're listening at lower volume and you have high dynamic peaks, the less the speaker compresses in terms of its ability to go from low to high volume really quickly. then that can make it sound like it has higher dynamic range.
Mm-hmm.
And usually this, like based on what I've seen with the speaker test that I've done, usually if a speaker has low distortion values, then it's going to have low compression as well. Like they're usually just the same things that make them low distortion also make them low compression or good linearity as you increase the volume. So you have that snap and attack and dynamic range and all that kind of stuff. So it's not always, a lot of people conflate having dynamic range with high sensitivity speakers, and it can be true, but it doesn't mean that you can't have high dynamic range with like modern or typical sensitivity speakers that are in like the 85 to 90 dB range. You can still have that. It's just got to be a well-designed driver. And a good example of that would be like the KEF Reference 1 Metas that I reviewed earlier last year. Those have impeccable dynamic range results. Like, I mean, there's no change in the response linearity when you go from 76 dB up to about 102 dB. I mean, it's crazy loud, which means that as you're listening to lower volume music and you have a high dynamic range peak come through on your music or your theater stuff that you're listening to, your movies, you're able to get all of that range. Nothing's chopped off at the top. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of my experience.
Yeah. Huh.
So one thing Dan was telling me, he said, we wanted to kind of mix it up because a lot of guys in 2-channel, they're real purist. And so they're all about no subwoofers, just full range, left and right. Yeah. So he told me, he said, man, honestly, these rooms, they're terrible. They sound terrible. And the cool thing is they brought 2 of their subwoofers. Mm-hmm. He got those dialed in and it really, really smooth. He said, man, the response in here is it's really good now. But a lot of that is because of implementing 2 subwoofers into that room and into that equation. And so he was just trying to give people a different experience than what they're used to, for 2-channel, because like I said, most people don't like, subwoofers. And I'm one of those guys that I think a subwoofer can enhance every system, whether it's 2-channel, home theater, when it's dialed in properly.
You should see Mike's first system. It was a tweeter, then 18-inch subwoofer. That's all it was. Just tweeter, subwoofer. All it was. No. Kidding.
Yeah. So we're actually going to have. We're working with Dan he's kind of designing a full Perlison home theater setup at M-Wave. So if you're interested in hearing them for the first time, man, be a good opportunity.
Yeah,
we can do a calibration one or what? I'll put you on the spot.
What's that?
Calibration. I want to compete.
Oh, you want to do?
I want to compete with somebody. You know what I mean? Compete with the auto calibration. That doesn't even sound fair, right? I'm going to compete with the automatic calibration. Like, of course I should win. I'm manually doing it. I don't know. I thought it would just be a fun. It's just fun.
Yeah, you should go, Joe. I can't go. I'm booked out for that weekend already, but
I can do it remotely. I just need somebody to move the mic around for me.
He don't want to come, man.
Erin can do it.
Cool like me.
No, it's not that. You know me. You know me.
There's a couple others that I kind of want to give a shout out to while I'm thinking about it. So there's AJ Soundfield from Soundfield Audio, and he's kind of like a DIYer type dude. Mm-hmm. And he was showing off his setup. So I'll show this picture real fast because I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of this brand. He's from the Tampa area. Honestly, I don't know exactly what city he lives in, but he's somewhat near that area. And I do have to thank him for inviting me out because he's kind of the reason I got out of my house and came down there. But yeah, so this is the speaker, right, that he demoed there. And the white cone drivers are a CIOS coaxial driver. And the top, he actually told me what it was in a YouTube post, but I can't remember. But it's like a tweeter ribbon type driver. And then on the back, he has don't quote me on this, but it's maybe a 2 or 3 inch driver on the back. Mm-hmm. And if he's watching this, and I apologize in advance, but somebody can go to his website and pull the details out. But if you're curious, like I was, you're like, well, what the heck? Why are you running a coaxial? First thing I thought was, why are you running a coaxial with a tweeter? So what he's doing is he has a switch. Right, he has all these speakers are ran active, and they're active 3-way. So the coaxial, I believe, is actually a passive setup, and what he can do is he can switch between coaxial only, and that would be quote unquote narrow radiation, and it's nothing else except for the coaxial playing up front, And then if he wants to go to wider radiation, he just pushes the DSP button, little HyperX amp, and then it switches from the mid-range of the coaxial, no tweeter from the coaxial, but the tweeter above it is playing now. So now you've got a wider radiation pattern. And then the third option that he has, again, all the same speaker, is for quote-unquote omnidirectional. So there's a speaker on the back that will play, and it's time delayed. Like, I want to say he said multiple feet, but don't quote me on that either. But the idea is that you get a very immersive sound field. And the reason he did that is because he thinks, that music is dynamic and people's preferences can be dynamic. So if you want everything under the sun, you've got that speaker. I want to say he said retail for those was $15,000 a pair. It's expensive, man. But the finish on them was super nice. And ironically, $15,000 a pair was kind of like the budget to mid-tier price at that show. Man. It's just
100%. Yeah, there's definitely the Von, I'm going to mess up their name, the Von
Schweikert.
They're like $100,000 pair of speakers. There's others that are way higher than that. And, you walk in and there's almost like now, surprisingly, I went and listened to the Focal Utopias. They look really cool and they're really expensive. But I only stayed for one demo because I was like, not too.
Was it jazz?
Okay,
I don't know. It was probably something I don't listen to, so that didn't help
bass
either. Yeah,
I've seen this big 15-inch woofer. I'm like, why are we not playing anything with bass, fellas?
Yeah.
Come on.
But I did hear the Stellias. Dude, those were sweet headphones.
Yeah,
and I also listened to the Celestes. Didn't care for those.
Yeah,
so,
which ones were those?
The Celeste headphones.
It's the cheaper ones,
headphones.
The non-beryllium ones. Yeah.
Gotcha. So they didn't sound that great. They had no bottom end for some reason. I'm like, okay, that's
kind of like Chana.
So the Stellies were fantastic, but they're still like $1,800 for a set of cans. I'm like,
that's better than the 3,000 they were.
I get it, but I was like, man, that's still a lot.
After every Monday podcast, we have an after show. If you're interested in joining us, go to patreon.com/Daily HiFi.